When we think about classical Latin epics, one work stands above all others, Virgil's Aeneid. Written at the dawn of the Roman Empire, it tells the story of Aeneas, a Trojan hero who survives the fall of Troy, journeys across the Mediterranean, and ultimately founds the lineage that would give rise to Rome. On the surface, the story looks like a myth, but at its heart, it also carries history, prophecy, and politics. It's a poem about destiny, adventure, and Rome's place in the world. After its creation, the Aeneid quickly became Rome's national epic. Its significance in Roman culture made it a work that scholars and readers sought to preserve across generations. Even after the fall of the Roman Empire, medieval scribes continued to copy the poem, preserving it when many other works of Latin literature disappeared. But Virgil did not invent this story from nothing. His epic is a culmination of a long tradition of Roman poetry, much of which is now lost. To fully understand the Aeneid, we have to look back at the poets who came before Virgil, those whose works shaped his vision, but whose voices survive today only in fragments, if at all. The Roman epic tradition started by translating and reshaping Greek stories. In the 3rd century BC, Livius Andronicus, a Greek freedman in Rome, translated Homer's Odyssey into Latin. His version, written in the old Saturnian meter, was rough and simple, but it proved something essential, that the Latin language itself could carry epic poetry. Without this first experiment, Virgil's hexameters would have had no precedent. But translating Greek works was only the beginning. A generation later, Gnaeus Naevius went further. In his Bellum Punicum, he created one of the first Roman epics in which Rome's legendary founding was connected to the Trojans, the people from the city of Troy who, according to myth, fled the city after it fell in the Trojan War. At the same time, he connected this mythic past to Rome's own history, specifically the First Punic War, which he had witnessed firsthand. For the first time, Rome's recent events were placed on the same scale as legendary stories. Naevius gave Romans more than a borrowed Homeric tale. He gave them a story of their own, where legend and memory fused. When Virgil later made Aeneas the founding hero of Rome, he was taking up a thread Naevius had already begun, the idea that Rome's destiny stretched back to Troy. By linking Rome back to Troy, Naevius placed Rome within a broader Mediterranean literary and cultural framework. Greek epics like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey had long celebrated heroic deeds, legendary lineages, and divine intervention. These stories were not just entertainment, they were a way for societies to define themselves, to connect their present with a meaningful past. And by inserting Rome's origins into this mythical story about the Trojan War, Rome presented itself as a civilization on equal footing with the ancient Greeks. In other words, Naevius was claiming that Rome was not merely a historical city-state, it could be a legendary civilization worthy of epic storytelling. This was a foundation that Virgil would later expand in the Aeneid, transforming a fragmentary idea into a full-scale national epic where myth, history, and moral purpose were inseparable. The next major figure in Roman poetry was Quintus Ennius, often called the father of Roman epic. His Annales traced Rome's history from Aeneas' arrival in Italy to Ennius' own time, blending myth, legend, and contemporary events. Unlike Naevius, Ennius adopted Homeric hexameters, giving Latin poetry the rhythm, grandeur, and formal scope of Greek epic. It was the first Roman poem to attempt a continuous narrative that linked Rome's legendary past with its historical present. Unfortunately, the Annales survives only in fragments. We have about 600 lines quoted in later authors, scattered across grammar treatises, histories, and commentaries. From these fragments, we can see that Ennius covered key episodes from Rome's foundation and early kings, and may have dramatized legendary battles, heroic deeds, and divine interventions. He likely included episodes from Aeneas' settlement in Italy, the exploits of Romulus and Remus, and early Republican history, but the exact content is uncertain. Even in the surviving fragments, Ennius' Annals reveals the foundation of which Virgil built the Aeneid. He experimented with blending history and myth, explored human choice, divine intervention, and civic responsibility. Beyond Ennius, there were many other Roman poets whose work helped shape the tradition Virgil inherited, but whose voices are now almost entirely lost. Pacuvius and Accius, for example, wrote tragedies in Latin, adapting Greek models while exploring themes of heroism, fate, and moral conflict. Varro Atanicus composed epic poetry, while Cornelius Gallus, a contemporary of Virgil, experimented with love elegy. Almost all of their works survive only in fragments or references in later authors, leaving us to imagine the scope of their contributions. Yet their experiments with narrative, style, and moral reflection created a literary environment that made the Aeneid possible. So, that brings us to the question, why did the Aeneid survive while all these other works did not? Many of the works that influenced Virgil were lost, because they were not copied as consistently or canonized in the way his epic was. Fires, invasions, neglect, and the fragile nature of handwritten texts all took their toll, while changing literary tastes and political shifts meant that some poets simply fell out of favor. As a result, the contribution of Naevius, Ennius, Pacuvius, Accius, and other intervening poets were largely erased from the historical record, leaving only fragments and references for us to reconstruct. The Aeneid survived not just by chance, but because it was embraced as Rome's defining epic, studied in schools, copied by generations of scribes, and valued as a cornerstone of Roman and later European cultural identity. In the end, the story of Roman epic is as much about what has been lost as what survives. The voices of Naevius, Ennius, and countless other poets are mostly gone, leaving only fragments and references, yet their experiments with myth, history, and style paved the way for Virgil. The Aeneid did not emerge from nowhere. It stands as a foundation built by generations of Roman poets who sought to give their city a heroic story. Virgil's genius lay in drawing on these earlier poetic traditions and lost works, synthesizing their themes and techniques into a single, cohesive epic that came to define Roman literature and identity. Through the Aeneid, we glimpse not just the story of Aeneas and the founding of Rome, but the cumulative ambition, imagination, and experimentation of an entire literary tradition. It reminds us that literature is never the work of a single author alone, but a conversation across generations. And even though some voices are lost to us today, they still echo through Virgil's epic, shaping the way we understand history, myth, and cultural identity.